One of the problems of the Queen's Gambit declines, and this position though, is that potentially later White has the c6 pawn as a target for a minority attack. So for example, what am I talking about here? Minority attack. It's when basically White plays to increase, the structural problems of Black's position here with this b4 b5 idea. So here is an example. So if White gets in b5, so the minority of pawns here is attacking a majority of pawns with the aim of inflicting structural damage. And usually, this backward pawn on this semi-open c-file can be a terrible problem, because then White can use control of c5, can put more pressure on c6, and generally more pressure on the dark squares. So if this structural change occurs, it's not very pleasant for the Black position. So let's look at more example games now from the Olympiad. I hope there was something instructive in this first game example. Let's whiz through it. So this was Van Wheelie against Kazgalian in round 9. So the semi-Slav at work. So we saw this bishop a6, which seems awkward, and I was wondering about it myself from the Kramnik-Anand match, and here's the answer. Black's prepared to sacrifice a pawn if White plays a takes b5. So and if a5, Van Wheelie has shown that the passed a pawn can be compensated by Black's central pawn mass, moving the central pawns forward. So we saw here White trying to win the bishop, followed by queening the a pawn, which did win the exchange, but it wasn't enough now to cope with Van Wheelie's central pawns. So a very nice demonstration here of how in the Slav, the semi-Slav in particular, you can just head towards a very pleasant endgame sometimes. So, another game example. Let's go back earlier. Al Sayed versus Hatton Beta. So this was in round, actually 11, not earlier, but different rounds. So how did Black play the Slav here? So semi-Slav territory, e6 again blocking in the Queen's bishop. Now bishop g5 was played, so a different system from White. After h6, bishop takes f6. So White's immediately giving up the two bishops. I think this is the Moscow variation, checking wiki. Yes, so I've confirmed it's the Moscow variation. So Black is encouraging White to concede the two bishops. So what is White getting in return here? Well, a lead in development, it can be quite dangerous, and also a lot of pressure, queen b3. So how would you handle this with the Black position? So in this series of videos on the Slav, I just want to explore what resources are available. So what did this game demonstrate? After knight d7, Black was faced with e4. So using that faster development, opening up the centre seems a very good idea. So Black played d takes e4, and after knight takes e4, retreated the queen right back. So we have the two bishops, but we're backwards in development. But is White able to bust this with d5 here? Apparently not. What White played was bishop d3, and now we saw a queen a5 check, knight c3, and now g6. So Black wants to put the bishop on g7. Is there time for this? After castles, bishop g7. Can White get away with d5? Let's have a quick look. d5, knight c5, queen c2. White can get the other bishop. Black can get the other bishop. And after CD, just castle, and that's fine for Black, according to Ribka. Black's got the advantage of the two bishops. It looks good. There's nothing concrete for White to attack. So let's go back. In the game, after bishop g7, White played c5. The problem with c5, although it's creating a clamp on, say, d6, and maybe a knight can manoeuvre there later, is this d5 square. So White, by the way, did outrate his opponent. He was 2-4-7-7, Al Sayed. So Black was Hatton Bata 2-3-7-5. So how did Black do from here? He castled, and now queen c7, and White played b4. So white's obviously going to increase the pressure on the queen side, stretching on the queen side with a4 and b5 maybe. b6 to try and undermine white's pawn chain. bc, dc. So it seems, white's going to have the d file maybe to utilise. The knight f6 though, the knight's coming to blockade on d5, so this is not such a practical issue, this d6 square, if it can't be got at. White also doesn't have the dark squared bishop. So after a4, a6, now white plays b5. Black took on b5, took again, and again the queen's pushed round, this time to e7. So it seems, black's playing kind of provocatively, saying come and get me, but he's got a solid enough position. On the other hand though, white's got a strategic asset here, this passed c-pawn, so how did black deal with it? So bishop a6, rook c8, now c6, knight e8, preparing to blockade at least on c7. Queen b3, king h8 now, and here white's got a small advantage according to Rivka and should have just carried on calmly with say bishop e2 or h3, but he ventured a piece sack. Now he played knight takes e6, and we saw after fe rook e6 queen g5. So one of the points here potentially is the queen is obviously attacking c1 and also probing g2, and maybe if c7 late, then bishop b7 is going to be handy. White played f4, and let's see, black didn't take that. If black took that pawn, then rook f1, and this is very dangerous apparently. Queen g5, rook takes g6, and black seems to be getting in real trouble here. For example, this kind of variation. So, in this kind of position, black's king is quite exposed, and if white can get in things like queen h5 and knight f5, is it dangerous? No, it's still not enough. Black, according to Rivka, is actually winning this. So let's go back. After f4, black could have taken, but instead he retreated again, queen d8. So he seems to be playing very provocatively in this game indeed. After c7, knight takes, knight d6. Now we saw queen g8. So a nice pin on that rook to the queen. Bishop takes a6, rook takes a6, and now f5. The piece sack hasn't worked out very well. Rook takes d6, and black's gaining another piece, and here white resigned. So, what resources were highlighted in this example game? Let's have a look at that again. So e6 again. So the black player's not afraid of this triangle blocking in their bishop. So we know now why. D takes c4 and b5 is a great plan for black. But we've got to factor in the move bishop g5 now. So white's not playing for e3 and bishop d3. And here h6 seems to be a playable move. So not moving your bishop to e7 on f8 rather. That would start to transpose into the Queen's Gambit declined in any case, a different system. So we're going here for the immediate dark squared bishop, and we're letting white even carry on aggressively in the centre with e4, and we don't mind returning our pieces to the first row in this variation. We've got the two bishops. We're saying to the opponent in effect, come and get me. So basically even this check drew a piece back, so it's kind of useful, and allowed black to cheekily even fianchetto the bishop, so it's got a nice position attacking the d pawn. White decided to play for c5, a committal decision on the queen side, and to try and gain space on the queen side. And black rerouted the knight potentially to d5. White created the passed c pawn, and again these kind of provocative moves with the queen, saying, okay, then use your c pawn. But black's exerting a lot of pressure now. to try and defend and also blockade the c-pawn. And here knight takes e6. So this was a practical idea which didn't kind of work out very well. Maybe, you know, other ideas were being considered instead of queen g5. One of the principal ideas maybe was to win g6 here with some advantage, but because of queen g5 attacking the rook, you know, what does white do here? He played actually f4, and apparently that could have just been taken. This doesn't seem that brilliant, this position. It's scarier than it seems. Black's still a piece up, and with a check and rook takes c6, apparently would have been fine in this variation.